All right, thank you everyone for your patience for us getting started today. I think it's the time that everyone's doing a million things, so we're just sorry for the slight delay there. But thank you so much for everyone here today for participating in the very first Creativity Conference. Just wanted to welcome you all to the Creativity Conference organized by AIALA Interior Architecture Committee. I am Karina Ellingson, if you don't know already, and the events manager at AIALA. Just wanted to give you guys, anybody who's new to AIA events, a brief synopsis of our mission. Our mission is to give the power of design and architecture to every corner of Los Angeles. Our vision is a city that flourishes from thoughtfully designed buildings and spaces in between. AIA truly appreciates your participation in this very first Creativity Conference and everyone involved here today. And now I'm going to hand it off to Jan, the chair of the Interior Architecture Committee. Thanks so much for being here, everyone.
Thank you all so much for being here. This is day 2 of the Creativity Conference. We had a spectacular event yesterday, great discussions, great stories, and a lot of thought-provoking conversations. And we are excited to have Stanley Felderman and Nancy Keating here today as moderators for day 2. We have another power-packed event for you in store. I apologize for not having my camera on. I think I have an issue with my camera. Doesn't want to cooperate today. I do want to do a really quick introduction to Stanley and Nancy. They are, I would say, the power design couple of LA. From objects to furniture to murals to spaces, they have done it all, and fabrics as well. And I can't wait to hear what they have to say about creativity and storytelling and the blurring boundaries of our disciplines, them practicing it all their lives. So over to Nancy and Stanley. I do want to also thank the sponsors, just a quick word to Stone Source and to HLB Lighting Designers and PLP for supporting us through this 2-day event. We do have 2 raffle prizes at the end of the event, so please stick around and see if you get to win one of the 2 awesome prizes we have. Thank you. So Stanley and Nancy now.
Oh, okay, perfect. Hi, everybody. We are, Stanley and I are honored to be here today to be moderating this creative conference, and so are grateful to AIA for inviting us. We're also excited because we get to hear Sarah Wurzberger and Skinner Myers. Sarah's a very talented textile designer, and you'll hear more about her story, which I think you'll find fascinating. And Skinner Myers is an award-winning filmmaker, and so look forward to seeing some of his projects and learning more. We're going to start by talking to you a little bit about who we are and our journey as well. Our focus today is really going to be about cross-disciplinary a focus that we have in our own projects, as well as you'll see in Sarah and Skinner's projects. And there was a video that was done, it's a short video about us when we were honored a couple years ago as by IIDA for being innovators in our industry, as well as a couple years ago we were honored as visionaries by Interior Design corporate humming contract in New York. So we're going to start with that, and then we'll talk a little bit more about our journey and share with you some things.
And it's been quite a journey.
Yes.
So I'm going to. So this short video kind of explains what we do.
There you go.
Design is the currency of the future. You know, creativity is the currency of the future. They come together because good design inspires. I think Felderman Keating Associates started, you know, when Nancy and I met. We also had the common passion for design and changing the environment.
Initially, you're taking the leap of faith, and it is trust-based that they're going to take you on a journey that is roughly the experience that you're asking for, but is ironically taking you to places that you never knew existed.
For us, innovation has to be the core of everyone's design.
We're constantly reinventing ourselves.
And that was what was attractive to us, because we felt like, okay, we could do something different.
We always come to every single project that we do with the fresh eyes, being open continually to new ideas.
We don't look at space as, architecture, but we look at it as a poetic interaction of elements.
We push ourselves to think differently.
MTV Networks is a perfect example where they had come to us with a predetermined program, and we kind of put it aside and said, we'd like to start from scratch. And we came up with a whole new dynamic that was unexpected.
We're a conservative, traditional law firm, so the idea of choosing Stanley and Nancy as our designer and our architect was something that was different from the standpoint of our 20 other offices that we had worldwide.
I've come up in the film and television business, so I've made a career out of kind of enabling the storytelling of others. And what I was struck by in looking at their portfolio of work, I felt like I was almost reading a script or a story. And I could almost project out from what I was seeing that they had already done, what they were yearning to do.
And I think the art aspect for us is really core, because that's what touches on the spirit.
Everything plays off of each other in a way that tells a story that is innovative, that is creative, and for the people that are working in the office and for visitors to the office, it has a great impact.
Function is really key for us. When we first start out with a client, really understanding who they are and how they function. Once we understand that, we start to be able to layer in the design, and then the art comes from that.
And then we come to an aesthetic or a design vocabulary that meets that DNA, responds to it, but also elevates it.
We developed space that had common areas. We developed space that was open. All of those ideas in an environment where you need to keep confidences was different and unique. But they did it in a way that recognized for us and for our clients a safety, a comfort. And in many ways, that is their art.
So it was a great opportunity for us to, from scratch, write a new narrative and tell a new story about us, allow them to tell a new story about themselves as artists and visionaries, and it ended up being a great collaboration.
Well, I think the core of who we are is also, we take a very holistic approach to design. When you affect the mind and the body, there's a third aspect when it comes together seamlessly or in a very poetic way. You touch the soul. I think what inspires both of us is that we affect the way people work, the way they live, the way they feel at the end of the day. And that's the intangible part, how does what you're doing and how does design, influence people and change their lives.
We're grateful for where we've been, and we're passionate about what we're doing and looking forward to what's next.
Okay, how do I get out of there?
There you go.
Click into Zoom. Whoop. 1 second.
Here we go.
What?
Close.
No. What? Where is it? Okay. Let me close that. Here we go. I'm back on screen. So that kind of, hopefully in a nutshell, explains quickly our philosophy of holistic design, and that it's a combination of architecture, objects, the poetic story, and ultimately, connecting with people. And the bottom line is we need to, our goal is to elevate the sense of connectivity with people within spaces.
So I think what we're going to start off, we're just going to go through a few images to talk about. The other day we were sitting and we were talking with Skinner and Sarah, and we were talking about where did we come from and what was our inspirations. So we're going to share a little bit about that, and then also where we're going for ourselves, and what's next. So I'll share our screen again. And
Okay.
there you go. Let me just start with that one. So you get to start with this one.
Right.
Okay.
So this is where I was born, the Bronx. So, and Skinner maybe can relate to some of this, I think, from your own upbringing. But, you know, I was born in a tenement, and this is a plot of land that I looked at when I was a kid and dreamed about living a better life. And that lot is still empty, and the tenement that I grew up doesn't exist anymore. But in our house, as you know, in tenements, you have clotheslines, and even on days, different people use that same clothesline. And my family, that were of Jewish descent, Russian Jewish descent, would send over blintzes on the clothesline to the Tucciarellos, who were Italian Catholic in the next building. And then on even days, the Tucciarellos would send over food that they made in this method, like lasagna. And that was our way of connecting. And early on, I knew that it wasn't about acquiring things. It was about connecting and touching each other in a loving and caring way. And that's my takeaway. I didn't take away about what I didn't have. What I left with is what I do have. And Nancy grew up in the West Coast in Pasadena.
So I grew up in a house. I was very fortunate to grow up in a house that was designed by a very talented designer by the name of Arthur Elrod. And I was blessed because I became fascinated by his attention to detail, between the woven divider screen between our dining room and our living room, and down to, you know, all those things that he picked for the house. So that attention to detail has really carried through for me in our own doing design, as well as the fact that later on I became a filmmaker myself. I was and also a producer of in a theater, and so the storytelling aspect, which is very important for us in the translating our clients' visions, has become a very important part as well. So those two things together have been incredible, you know, inspirations for me.
So this is me at the age 24, and my first project after school, and it was the headquarters of Fabergé. We don't have time to get into, you know, why, how I got that, but the head of Fabergé entrusted this in me. And when I did the drawings, all he said is, can it be built? And being 24 years old, I said, of course it could. And 2 years later, this is what happened. And it was it wound up being exhibited in the Museum of Modern Art and the Whitney Museum, and jump-started my career. And Philip Johnson came over to me and said, Stanley, you're starting your career with what most people end their career with. So it was a tough journey for me to try and accomplish that. And I incorporated things like neon lighting, fiber optics, created because they're a cosmetic company, when we talk holistically, I created a virtual showroom that we infused the space with scent, and we used cathode lighting because we didn't have LED lighting back then in the 70s. That created a mix of lighting so we could get warmer, cool light. And then, you know, as you know, the economy goes up and down. There was we went into a recession right after I finished Fabergé, and banks were in trouble. So I said that the future of banks is going to be tellerless banking. So I designed the Bank of the Future, and this looks a little like R2D2, and this was in 1974.
Actually, the next one even looks more.
And it looks more. And Burroughs and Mosley Corporation got hold of it, and I wound up designing with them the first ATM machines. So that was a little out of the box from being architecture. And to fast forward, taking that thinking, and this was a pivotal project for us and for you guys, everybody out there, that there's some certain moments in your career where you're asked to really step up to the plate and look at the bigger picture. MTV Networks in '94 was that project. And because they're in entertainment, we took an Airstream from the idea of the Long Trailer, which was a movie, and retrofitted it as a meeting room. We didn't have flat screen TVs, so I took regular monitors and put them into these talking heads that were interactive.
And then also within this building, there were like 5 different divisions, so that we ended up branding every single one differently to just meet their particular brand and vision.
And these are some of the initial sketches, and you know, I love to draw. So these were almost cartoon-like because they communicated to MTV the way they understood, you know, drawings, and we got it built. As a result of that, do you want to?
So yeah, so as a result of that, we were approached by Steelcase and also Interface. Steelcase to design the Office of the Future and where would we be going and what kinds of things did we see for the future, like movable ceilings, and this was the time of you know, beginning almost before Bluetooth and you know, wireless, and so we were experimenting and looking at how the work surface was going to go vertical and how your phone would end up being your major form of communication. So these were ideas and kind of storyboards that we started putting together to translate.
Well, but the interesting thing is that, you know, we tend to gravitate towards our own profession. And if you're going to think holistically, we were one of the first designers to attend tech conferences. This was in the 90s. And we learned that technology was going to be the driver of the Office of the Future. And the bottom is that piece that kind of united all about tech devices, and we predicted the idea that the phone was going to be the device of choice. Mm-hmm. And then we put together these 3 images because they were all projects that asked us to create a space that told a story about interface on the lower left-hand corner, that they wanted to be thought of as, you know, that their corporate headquarters was their home. So we so we created an environment that looked like Frank Lloyd Wright because it grounded itself to the earth. They were starting to dabble in environmental responsibility, so we used all natural materials, and we created a conferencing system that was basically felt like you were in somebody's living room.
And the top one is a Pillsbury Winthrop project. And it was one of the first law firms that started to have glass so that you could see through and that there would be transparency. So bringing attorneys out of the offices and having much more of cooperation between the two. So, fine.
And then we're going to go through this quickly because of time. We only have 20 minutes. But these are some of the inspiration sketches that we use. This was Samsung in Korea and the Shibuya station in Japan. And we created these magical environments in Japan because it's so urban. We said, well, let's bring the concept of forest to the city. So these are glass pods with light coming through that emulated the idea of a forest. And we were graced by meeting Julius Schulman at a reception that we had at our house. And these are his photographs. And he wound up not charging us for the photographs because he loved our house so much. And our kids are 20 years old now, and they were, and this is what they were, you know, back then. And this is Julius in the background. He was a ham, so he always liked to be in his own photographs. So it's kind of cool. And we designed a house. This was designed in 2001. that was open. It was one of the early concepts of open planning. And the girls used to take their razors and go in and out of the house. And our poor kids were surrounded by icons of design. So there's no hope. So as a result, you know, they're both artists and going to RISD. And I know that Sarah, you graduated from RISD as well.
Yeah. So this is a recent project for a film distribution company. And again, we had started really infusing our projects with a lot of art. I mean, this is on the right-hand side is a light box. These are Stanley's renderings and drawings. And then the divider panels are, you know, art pieces, as well as creating, you know, having a purpose. Go ahead.
Yeah, and then this is a virtual, this is a company that deals in virtual reality, and you know, LA is blessed with good weather. So we said, let's create a building that opens up completely. So this is the outside looking in, and the conference rooms and all the furnished spaces open up to the outside. And inside, we use art and acoustic panels to divide the space. These guys had no money, and all this is stretched nylon printed over acoustic material. But it's thinking out of the box. It's trying to bring, you know, inexpensive materials together that create rich spaces. And you know, from the conference room looking out.
Oh, okay. Well, you'll come back to that. Go ahead.
Yeah, and then we do a lot of art installations, and this is on Hollywood Boulevard. I'm always doing cartoon drawings, and our client happened to love them and said, what if we blow these up, you know, like 3 stories high? And this is the result of that. And for P. Diddy.
For P. Diddy, we did a whole branding program and an identity a program for him, and presented these off of some of his original art. We took it and manipulated it. So we're also, you know, always trying to really rethink what would work for somebody to express who they are, from, you know, the use of graphics and our manipulation of them in our own artwork.
Right.
So.
And because they're a TV program, we took screenshots. These are screen grabs. And we created these huge art installations, and it worked out really well for them. And this was, Legendary Pictures was a great client for us, and you saw in the video. So one of their properties is Godzilla. So we said, what if we do Godzilla as this abstract monster coming out of the rocks? So these are the early sketches.
And maquettes.
Maquettes, and then we created this supersized foam
9-foot Godzilla.
Godzilla, and this is the end result when it's finished and painted. So we went from this to this, it was miraculous. And I also did the art piece, which is a painting of Pittsburgh with all of their different monsters and everything in. It's like finding Waldo, you know, in the picture.
It has everything from 42 to I think it was Inception to Pac Rim and they're all in that.
So here's the example. Although it's a minimum space, it's also a space that that is enriched with cross-disciplinary design, from a painting to a piece of sculpture to a piece of furniture that is a work of art itself. It's like a reel of film, and it's all about light. And then we do a lot of restaurants, and our client commissioned us to do a large-scale mural for Drago. And out of that, we got commissioned to do a line of textiles for Momentum. And
so as you can see, so we created 7 lines. I think there's 46 colors for this product. And there's some more. And then this was a large-scale ceramic tile mural that we created. It was like, how high was it?
It was 30 feet tall.
30 feet tall.
But these are the individual glazed tiles, and just to fast forward where we are now, we have come up with a line of furniture that in itself is a vehicle to display art. And these are some of my art and drawings that are through Nevermore
That's not
printed.
it's Wilson Art.
Wilson Art, excuse me, sorry, Wilson Art. And this was for Creative Artists Agency, and they're in the Chrysler Building, so that's what the Chrysler Building is. And the conference table has the image of the Chrysler Building in it. And we're currently working on a line of acoustic furniture that has a hollow honeycomb acoustic substructure, so that the whole body of the furniture helps with acoustics. And as a result of COVID-19 and the need to separate, although these two guys are a little close, we have brought in the idea of nature, the idea of separation and connection at the same time. And we're also looking at the idea that there's filtration within the furniture itself. So, so it's a biophilic, and we're developing personal pods where, and this is actually a maquette that we had. We've done a few of these, and privacy screens that also allow for transparency.
Mm-hmm. These were vessels that we do, basket vessels that we had designed for Vanini, and they're out of glass. So we'll just keep going because I know we're on a, oops.
Yeah, just no, okay.
Okay, and these, we've worked on a line of tennis shoes as well. And
yeah, and well, let me go back to the tennis shoes. So we're really into product. Our daughter's taking fashion as a major. So that's a result of us, you know, getting into some of fashion and jewelry ourselves. And these are some of my drawings. And Nancy's come out with a cool jewelry line.
That relates, has a relationship to nature and the natural organicness of it. This is a line of china that we had done for Sasaki that was, again, kind of a exploration of how can we do something different. Every single piece doesn't match.
But the interesting part about it is that these were designs that we found from wallpaper samples. So we kind of looked at, you know, wallpaper in our library and said, what if we translated them as drawings into ceramics? And then for Interior Design Magazine, they asked us to come up with some artistic statements about COVID-19 and the pandemic and separation. So I'm known, some of you may realize that I'm known for recycling coffee cups. So this is the COVID-19 monster. And then these are New Yorkers on terraces talking to each other. And as an homage to New York, which they asked us to do as well, it was a series of cups that relate to diversity in New York and the architecture, both in a very painterly way and more in a graphic way. And they're put on these panels that I do that are called Cityscape, and it's a city grid. So, and we're working on some wallpaper designs. And this is an actual canvas that I painted.
It's a large size piece that we did for a house down by the water.
So I just wanted to share that we work on large scale, or I do work on large scale paintings as well. And this was our solution for the Notre Dame. So I believe in the poetry of trees, that trees have a secret language. So I take photographs of trees and create these kind of Gothic palace images. And we thought, what a great idea to create the roof structure that's Gothic out of the replication of the structure of trees. And if we look inside, this is what the roof of the Notre Dame would look like. So it's the organic, sort of biophilic nature of the tree over a Gothic interpretation of what nature is. And currently in New York, if you want.
Oh, currently in New York, we're very interested in immersive environments. And so you'll see that in this. And this is for a lobby in New York that we're working on currently. And actually that image changes, but we weren't able to show that movie today. But so it changes over time. And then this one as well, this is Legendary 2.0, where we're changing the identity and the brand of who that company is and making it a more immersive environment that when you come out of the elevator, these characters greet you and take you into.
He actually moves through the space and brings you into the lobby.
And that dinosaur actually comes down. So
so this is very exciting for us to reinvent what we had already done. And the last image here is a picture of our studio looking up. And for me, it represents optimism. And through Capolini, we got the rainbow chair and the globe, which has no borders. It's a teaching globe. So we look at the Earth as not bound by countries, but as one. And when we walk in the door every day or out the door, this is what we see. So. Okay, so that's our that's us. That's our slideshow. We tried to keep it as brief as possible, but hopefully it kind of edified in a physical way what we think of philosophically, that as designers we need to think big picture. We need to not think of space as space is architecture, but what is the foundation of architecture? It's about touching the soul. It's about capturing an imagination. It's about lifting the spirit. And if we, within our own groups, have the talent to do it all, then great. If we don't, then we need to seek collaboration. So when Craig Hodges was talking yesterday about collaboration, that we didn't do any of this alone. You know, our clients had input. We talked to suppliers and people of knowledge within fields that we didn't know. So that's how we were able to do this. And what inspires us is to not replicate what we already did. We think that what we did in the past, and with a vision towards the future, that becomes the bridge towards the future for us. So I'll leave you with that. And maybe Nancy would like to.
And so now, excuse me, I want to take the opportunity. Let me get something to drink. So as from our own work, you can see that there is a lot of cross disciplines, and that's what I've found in talking with Sarah, and then also looking at her background. That Sarah Wurzberger is originally from Kansas, now lives in Portland, and went to Rhode Island School of Design, where she received her MFA, and then went on to work with Nike as a material designer. And then her focus is weaving work, a practice that spans everything from hand to digital weaving in art and design. And she has, I know you said that your things have to do with play and color interaction and spirituality. And I thought that was really, fascinating. So I'm looking forward to hearing more. And that you have an ongoing investigation of materials and making processes that are playful, with an emphasis on performative active making. And that you do both functional and non-functional. That recently you did 20 artist blankets with the Weaving Meal in Chicago. And you did a pop-up, which I thought was fascinating, with the Hammer Museum in LA. So maybe we could get to hear a little bit more about that. And then your showcase at the Heath in San Francisco. And then you said recently you had your solo show. So look forward to hearing more about all your work and what you're up to and your inspiration and sharing, because we've seen her work, and Stanley and I both were very much blown away by it. So.
Yeah, even before we knew we would be talking with you, we were very impressed. Yes, and I'm particularly impressed with the fact that you chose hand looming in a digital age, and I hope you touch on that. because
Yeah.
you bring in, how to combine digital with the hand.
Yeah,
And
for sure.
that speaks to both Nancy and I. So thank you. So the rest, so we hand
it off
over
to you.
Okay, awesome. Thanks very much. Really super impressive work, you guys. That was amazing to see that portfolio. It's just like, wow. Very inspiring. So I'm going to go into a little more background as far as before I get into my presentation. I just wanted to say, again, I'm from Kansas. I grew up in a family that didn't really have artists or designers in the family per se. I think the closest we had was my mom had a uncle that was a Pulp Fiction illustrator in the 50s and 60s. So actually that's a painting of his right there. So I grew up with a little of that around the house, but other than that, my mom was into art, and I kind of in high school got into painting and drawing, and then from there went to art school in Baltimore at MICA for painting. And at the time, I hadn't been exposed really to design or applied craft or applied arts at all. So I was really into painting mostly, but then I took a weaving class. So right now I'm mostly a textile artist for about like the past 10 years. So I took a weaving class in undergrad, and it was like up in this little attic in the fibers department. And I just remember the teacher was like, we're like second-class citizens compared to the rest of the department, because everyone at the time had really looked down on craft. And so I didn't really know, I knew that I enjoyed weaving, and I thought this is really like, so there's something homey about it and something that's clicking with me, but I didn't know how to apply it to my life. So I just kind of like didn't do anything with it, set it aside, and went on with my thing to, I'm going to go become an artist. I'm going to move to New York City. So that's what I did. I worked for a couple artists. I worked for Matthew Barney studio in his sculpture shop. And then I was an art handler, just doing a bunch of things. And then 2008 rolled around, and I was just having trouble surviving in New York. So I thought, you know what, I'm just going to move home. So I moved back to Kansas, and basically became inspired from there in this whole new way that I wasn't expecting. And I took a class at KU in Lawrence, and it was a textile design course. And from there, I was like, okay, it clicked. I knew I needed to do that. And so 10 years after undergrad, I applied to grad school, and that's when I got into RISD. So that's where my presentation will start. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Sorry, can you guys see the full view? Oh, there we go. Okay, so so a lot throughout this talk, I'm going to talk a lot about looms. And I just wanted to quickly say that as a weaver, what I do depends kind of on what loom I'm using. So any weaver is always interacting with a loom. So it's the tool that we use. I kind of think of it as like a bicycle, for like a road bike is for racing and mountain bike is for biking, but they all have the same mechanics basically. So this loom is the one that's at RISD. It's a industrial loom that you would see, that you would use for like upholstery actually. And it needs a technician to run it. This woman in the purple is a technician. This guy as well, he's a technician. So that's one of my pieces coming off of the loom. The reason when I went into RISD, they wanted me to go into using this loom because it lends itself very well to like making imagery versus more basic weaving that's kind of more geometric. So this kind of was lent itself to my work in painting. And so this is my studio at RISD. It was a desk basically, but it has a bunch of my Dolly Parton, we got Geronimo, Sitting Bull. And then, so into some of my first projects at RISD, I was using, we were supposed to respond to a piece of architecture in downtown Providence, and I was responding to this, the first mall in America, I guess, built in the turn of the century. And it was a Greek revival building. So I was looking at these Greek faces as a way to like frame the storytelling that I wanted to do about this building. So I would come up with paintings that this is a file for weaving. And basically I would come up with these kind of paintings, and then you can scan them into the computer and then come up with a file like this where it's all put together. And then this file is actually like a technical file where all the colors represent a weave structure. And so not to get too much into the nitty gritty, but it's basically like paint by number. And so this is the final piece here. I think I was calling it like Dance Party USA. And there's like some, here's like a close up of it. So it's very fine. It's almost like upholstery weaving. And you can see here in this video, this is the loom. It goes super quickly. It does 300 yarns per minute back and forth. So it's very like easy in terms of like physically, you don't have to weave it. And then for my thesis at RISD, I was making work that was in response to kind of my dissatisfaction of my life in New York, the like capitalist art world. And also when I went back to Kansas, I had met this whole group of people that were they're this group of people that called themselves the FUN. And they were all about, you know, back to the land and community in a way that I had like really been missing out on. And so what I did is I made this collection of blankets that I wanted to be sort of like relics or like spiritual objects in a way for this new mythology that I had come across. And then I was inspired by nudie suits. I don't know if you guys are familiar, you see like country western music. They would have these like really elaborate embroidered suits. And on the suit, there'll be this like symbols that, you know, represent whatever you like or your personality. And I also was inspired by the way like country music tells stories in the actual songs. They're always kind of like tongue-in-cheek and short little vignettes. And so I would do these kind of little drawings. And then this is like actually a close-up of a drawing that's going to go to the loom. So again, it's like technical colors in the sense that this won't be what it looks like. This is actually what it looks like in the end. But I wanted it again to look like the embroidery that you see here. So it all kind of represents that personal mythology. These are, when I would go to the loom, you saw the loom, it was like a big industrial loom. I would bring with me a whole bag of colors. And what started to happen is that I realized that I wanted the weavings to be, the finished pieces to be the experience of weaving itself. So a lot of times in design, you know, you'll perfect samples over time, and then so you can make mass quantity of whatever you're making. But instead, what I did is I take all the colors to the loom, and then with the technician, it was almost like this, like being a conductor or something. I'd be like, okay, and stop that, and then we'd tie off a new color. And so whatever came off, this was just, it was a way of injecting spontaneity into the process of weaving. This is the piece on the loom, and you can see on the left, it's this came from a photograph where it was water, but it kind of had this like optical quality to it. And yeah, I was just going for this sense of like otherworldliness or joy that I felt from the community that I had Um, and this piece is super tall. It's like 80 feet, or I'm sorry, not 80 feet, 80 inches tall. And there's a horse. I think I was using the horse as this sense of like freedom, I guess. And then also this has a bunch of little characters. There's like a little dog in the corner, and there's all these little drawings throughout. And then this is the back of the weaving. So it kind of has this like, it's like I just think of it as like the spiritual world side. It's like a ghost horse. And then this is the actual design on the computer before. So just to show you, I know you probably can see this, but this is like, I was using photography as well as like the drawing imagery that I have in the background. So that the woman, she was getting in a sauna, and it's down there in the corner. And this, again, you can just see how I was changing colors at the loom. I think this one was called like Down the Rabbit Hole or something. And yeah, just representing like joy. And this is, I used mohair in this, so they're all very soft and like blanket-like. Moving on from that quickly, I'll just jump. I got a job at Nike after graduate school, so that was really exciting for me. I had no idea where I was going to land, and I ended up working at Nike for 4 years as a material designer in footwear. So I worked with all kinds of materials from wovens to knits, leather, synthetics. And at Nike, there's the footwear designer, the color designer, and the material designer. So I was just focused on solely on materials. And I made this material with a vendor in Korea, or Taiwan, I mean. And then it was kind of a fun process at Nike. You'd do these projects back and forth with textile suppliers, and then you could see your work on product. And also I got to see the entire cycle of product, which, from marketing to development to getting it to market and pricing. So that was really interesting. And here's a few more variations on that specific material. And this is just another one that I did. And then while I was at Nike, I ended up, having all this exposure at RISD and Nike to a bunch of technology, and which was totally awesome. It was all at my fingertips, but I also wanted to take a step backwards and go more deeply into hand weaving. So that's where that comes in, because I felt like I hadn't really done that much at RISD. It was a lot of the industrial weaving. And so I kind of wanted to step deeper into that. And how I did that was I went to a bunch of residencies. I went to Haystack. This is called Haystack in Maine. They have like, there's a well-known craft residency. So they have all kinds of mediums there that you can work on. And this is the weaving room. I also, there I was just exploring like basic weave structures on a very simple loom. Like this loom is just, you can basically just do mostly geometric stuff. And so what I figured out from that is that once I took away the ability to make imagery like I could on the fancy loom at RISD, it kind of brought color to the forefront in a way that color was almost the subject itself. And so I was able to, start playing around with these relationships and that the color had, and create space and depth. And that was sort of an interesting change for me, to go from figuration to then like kind of embracing the abstraction more. And then, I just wanted to mention that with weaving, a lot of my inspiration actually comes from the library, because you can't get a lot of the textile information from the internet, because it's all in print and these old books that no one has, or that many people haven't been interested in a long time. So that's been kind of cool. So at Haystack, I definitely spent some time in this library. Here's like an example of things that you would find in books that are harder to find on the internet. And then during that time, I'm still working at Nike. I started to work with some friends of mine called the Weaving Mill in Chicago. They're an artist-run mill, and basically they aim to fill the space between the hand and industrial made and bring mechanics of textile into a wider view. And so I contacted them once I realized that, long story short, they had come into like having 2 power looms and this industrial space. And I was like, we should definitely work together. And they were like, yeah, why don't you come out to Chicago and sample some stuff? So this whole project felt like it felt kind of punk, because it wasn't really like they were just like had these 2 looms, and they're just getting going. And so the idea was to like get the artist into the mill and to have the mill be more of a integral part of the process, rather than having it like designer and then like the mill is very cloistered and it's part of it's not a part of the process often. So the fact that they were artists enabled us to kind of embrace that. This is a loom that I did the samples on, and so it kind of matches up with the other power loom that they have. And the goal was just to go there and explore. And I made the sample length here, and then we cut it in half, and then each of us could have a piece of that. And so these are the samples that I made over like the course of going there twice. It was really fun. I would just like fly to Chicago for a weekend and weave, and then fly back to Portland. And after we did these samples, we're like, okay, well, what do we want to do? We were like, well, we decided, let's do a blanket project. And so we'll weave 20 blankets. And we didn't really have a home for them at the time. It was kind of just like, let's just do this project. It'll be super fun. I designed this warp on the right. It's like a little painting. And then on the left, it's like a weaver's tool for seeing it at scale. So this is the final design is about 12 inches long right here. And then this is the final design on the warp beam. So this is about 60 inches long. So it's just a quick way to see it. And yeah, this is kind of crazy. It's actually kind of crazy warp structure, but you wouldn't know that unless you're maybe a weaver or something. But it's a little, normally you'd do something a little less crazy, I think, on the warp. But anyways, then I got a huge palette together of yarns, and we decided we would sample on the industrial loom and just see what, using the samples that I had made, and see what came of it. And so we set aside about 5 yards on the warp and just made a bunch of sample blankets. And so we could see different colors, different patterns, how they worked or didn't work together. This is us at the loom. This is my friend Maddie just like writing down basically the technical specs of what we were doing. Just getting goofy later at night. And finally, like the next day, we were looking at this is like the sample blanket, and just looking at what worked, what didn't work, came up with a little recipe for like prototypes. And then we did these little prototypes. We hung them up much like you'd hang up paintings, looking at shape, proportion, color, and this little video of the process that I took. And then this is kind of the final design we ended up going with here. And we did two designs. This is the more wild one, and then we had a more subdued one. And this one ended up, Herman Miller in New York bought two for the opening of their store. And then the RISD Museum acquired one. So that was really encouraging. And what do I have next? So I went out to, while this was all going on, I was still working at Nike. I went out to, Andrea Zattel has a kind of compound. She's an artist. She lives in Joshua Tree, and she kind of focuses on how to live, I guess you could say, where her life and her art is kind of like designed in this like total artwork way, where, you know, she designs like how she structures her day. She designs the bowl she drinks out of. You know, every single thing is completely considered. But one of the reasons I went out there is that she has this weaving studio and that she had started, and I like wrote to her and asked her if I could come out there, and she said yes, to my surprise. And so I did go out there and wove on the looms for a week and just kind of got to know her a little bit, and, you know, traded our little geeky things about weaving. And that was really great. Later on, I came back to Portland, and she asked me if I wanted to be a part of this pop-up that she had at the Hammer Museum. And that pop-up was kind of having people that were that had been out to her place at AZ West contribute in some sort of way. And so that's what I did. And luckily I had like just bought this loom. I had just quit Nike. I had just bought this loom. So I was like perfectly prepared to start making some blankets. This was the initial setup that I had. So it's a little tiny room in the back of my house. And this was the design for the warp that I was going to make. So I think I made 17 yards. It was about 6 blankets. And it's quite an undertaking, actually, to hand weave that many. I think I did 8 blankets total. And at the time, I don't know that I hadn't hand woven that much before. So I just dove in and said, let's go for it. This is the my like palette that I have for the weft yarns, which are the horizontal. And so each one of these blankets kind of I approached as a spontaneous design. Each one is one of a kind, one off. I don't really draw beforehand. I just go for it. I like to see how things are interacting with each other as I'm going. And that's part of the excitement for me, because in a way you're almost like risking failure at some points. But then maybe you can like pull it back. So at least you make sure in the end you have 8 decent blankets. And yeah, so these are really fun. A lot of hard work. I was interested in you know, creating optical illusions, breaking up the space, and not having the weavings just be like typical weavings. I guess each one is sort of a work of art, and represents the experience of weaving in of itself. And then during this time, I went to, what is this? This is the West Coast Craft Fair in San Francisco. And I was still weaving actually these blankets over the course of, I think the pop-up was up for almost 9 months or something. So I was able to keep contributing blankets as I was weaving them. And this one is like, you can definitely see my process, you know, each color decision, and see the length of time. In a way, it exposes the process of weaving, because you can see all these color changes. And these ended up going back to the Hammer Museum as well after the pop-up, or after the craft show. And while I was at the craft show, I actually met the woman that owns He Ceramics, and she did not tell me who she was at the time, but I talked to her apparently, and then a month later I got like a an email from her and said, hey, would you want to make us some, or like do this artist pop up at the Heath and make some stuff. So this is an image from the second project that I did, where I was making, again, hand weaving a lot of pillows and a lot of yardage for Heath Ceramics, where I ended up making a collection of pillows for them. This is the warp, the yarn on the loom, and then on the right you can see that it's after it's woven off of the loom. I went for a red warp, which was very bright and a little bit hard to tame, but I kind of wanted it to be bright, so it was fun. It ended up being really fun. Yeah, I was just kind of going, for joyful colors, trying to get really be kind of out there with the designs, and each pillow ended up being sort of each one was unique and an artwork in and of itself. And then this is at Heath Ceramics, the actual store. And I think I was there and just answering people's questions, and I was weaving on a little table loom so they could see what weaving was. And then, I did a Portland Design Week too. I actually forgot to I was going to take that out. And then this is, I also did some artwork where, again, the loom is really important. This was at the school I was teaching at while I was doing all this, I was teaching at the Oregon College of Art and Craft, and they had this loom there that is a digital loom. So it's in between the big industrial loom at RISD and a hand loom. So it's kind of a mix between hand and computer weaving. And it's very sleek and Norwegian, so it's kind of a pretty loom, and it has it's hooked to the computer here, and you have your design on the computer. And then this is one of the weavings that I made on this loom. And so these are more like artwork pieces for the wall. I like the idea that they're both woven and kind of look like a painting, so they're in between worlds in a way. And this is what it looks like on the computer. It's just a black and white file, and the loom reads either black or white, up or down. And then this is me. I couldn't find any pictures that I had from actually weaving on it, but this is like a still from the school had a video. And here's another piece. And feel free to interrupt me if I'm not sure what the time is, but it's coming close to the end of my talk. So these pieces I was kind of interested, I think I was calling these like meta plaids, because I was weaving like plaids and cloth on a digital loom that you would normally weave plaid on a very simple loom. So it was kind of nerdy, but, and then this is just as an example of the drawing, I would make a drawing, and then this would be like what the file looks like on the computer of me messing around how I wanted to get it composed. And these are more computer files. And then this is a solo show that I had in Portland. It was my first art solo show, and some of it included some of these works that I made on the digital loom, as well as artworks that I was using my loom at home to try to find a new way to make figuration. These are all digital works right here, but this one as well. And this one I used several digital files, and so like it was kind of like I would stop the digital file in between and then make another, then open up another one. So that's why it looks more glitchy, because it actually is kind of stopped and started. This one I was using paint, I had done big paint brush strokes. And I'm really interested in just the optical illusions that you can create, and kind of using, like in these particular ones, these are bases for this is the actual artwork. But then this one on the left was a base for this print that I did, where I'm interested in like using the ombre or using the color fade to create an effect where you don't know, or you're wondering like, what is this thing? Is this textile? Is this weaving? Is this print? You know, like it kind of makes you stop and makes you wonder. And that was kind of the goal of what I was doing with these. And this is the black area is it's called a sublimation print. And I learned about it at Nike, actually. It's a heat process where it goes directly into polyester. So that pink area is polyester. And then this one is it was this one in the middle here. And then I printed onto it with sublimation. And so it created the optical effect. And I think that's about it for me. And then I had one more thing in New York, and that was a show in March. And then after that, I got a new studio, and that's been my focus for the past few months, is fixing the studio up and getting a bigger space that's a little more workable. Yeah, that's it.
So that was wonderful. Thank you. It was great.
Well, thank you.
And, you know,
So she could take it off the screen share.
Oh yeah, let me take off screen share.
There you are.
Thank you.
So I don't know if anybody has any questions, but I had a question, which was the colors that you're using are so wonderful. You know, what was your inspiration? Where do you get your inspiration for those colors?
You know, I think it's kind of more of a like idiosyncratic approach for me, where it comes from, as I'm weaving, I'm actually like getting excited or feeling joyful or getting, you know, it's more of just like coming from me than actually, you know, saying like I taking a trip where I traveled and I was like, I'm inspired by the city or something like that. You know what I mean? Yeah. But also I'm super inspired by like other cultures. And I think, traveling or seeing like any kind of like African textile, or like I went to India before, just seeing how they think about color being very, it's not the same colors that we use here. They don't have the same meanings that they have here, you know? And so I just like using color in a way where I'm trying to like block out the rest of the world and just do what I feel is like inspires me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I just want to say that your work is really spectacular. It really transcends like a woven product, and it becomes, you know, an artistic statement, and then it's translated into a pillow or an object that's utilitarian, but it doesn't lose its artistic nature, you know. Mm-hmm. So that's a very rare capability, and you balance that really well. So I have to say that your work is very compelling, and I want to talk to you later because we want one of your pieces. I have to live with it, but I'm also intrigued by the ombre. You know, we've been working with, you know, art in spaces that, you know, elements that have an ombre effect actually soothe people. You know, they're very meditative. And what's behind that for you, that you choose to use, you know, bright colors on one end, and then the softness and translucency of the color of one color fading to
yeah. I think it creates a sense of space and depth that interests me. So automatically when you use an ombre, there's a space created, you know what I mean? And so that's kind of what interested me. And then on a technical level with weaving, I'm like, okay, how do I do that with weaving, you know? And so that was kind of what my goal was. And I just like having that optical play, I think. but I love that idea of it being a calming. You know, I hadn't really thought about that. I know my work is very, because of the colors, I know there's like different types of people out there or something. I know people probably either love or hate my work. I don't know if there's an in-between, but
It's all love. There's no hate.
that's all. Oh, thanks. Yeah. Um,
Yeah. So, yeah. So, do you, if you were to, so I see that you do the hand looming, but you
mhm.
really have the capability to create objects of art
Mhm.
through the computer and translating it into a weaving machine. And you know, we've done that with Momentum. And
Mhm.
just as an aside with that, and I really understand, is that we've been working with Eileen Fisher, the fashion
Oh
brand.
yeah. Mhm.
And, I went to the studio for a week and we repurposed her textiles into felting,
Oh,
and she
cool.
makes works of art out of it. And you know, so I think there's a movement within the fashion industry where we're taking textiles, repurposing them, and selling them as art. And it's a way to, you know, instead of just recycle, you repurpose, which is much
Yeah.
more efficient. Your work has a layered effect to it when I look at it. It's almost like you know, when I first looked at it, I thought, oh, did she take this like old blanket and then overlay a digital image onto it
Yeah.
and so on? But I'm really impressed that you've sort of melded nostalgia with tech.
Oh, cool. I
So
like that.
yeah,
Thanks.
yeah. So there you are.
Yeah.
Can you maybe, is that a draw? Is that part of it, or is it something now that we talked about it, you're interested
Um,
in?
Definitely. I mean, I think that that's a really interesting way to put it. I hadn't heard anyone put it that way before, but I love that because I'm definitely interested in looking backwards. You know, that's part of like going to the library, going, you know, seeing what the old lady, or you know, what the older loomers are doing, older weavers are doing, and then, you know, taking a part of that. But then also I really enjoy looking forward as well. Like I love some of those weavings that I made. The designs were actually just fully made on the computer, so they're totally digital. And the computer is actually interesting. I don't know if you guys know this, but it was basically developed from a weaving, how do I say this? This guy in the 1700s was a weaver, and the guy Babbage who invented computers met this guy and used the Jacquard technology to create his idea for the computer. So there's like a super overlapping relationship with looms and computers, and so it's kind of this, it's kind of, they're really connected, you know, in that like looking back, but also like they're connected to basically you know, the computer being made. So yeah.
Yeah, well, and it's really interesting in working with textiles. We learned about the history of the jacquard loom, and
Mm-hmm.
still the foundation of what we do today. And the only thing is, it's not punched cards.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
it's the computer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So so if you were to kind of fast forward, you know, in 10 years from now,
Mm-hmm.
or 5 years if you can't grasp 10, because in today's world, 5 is, you know, far. So where would you see yourself going creatively? What gets your juices going?
Oh man. Yeah, that's, I am not sure totally right now, but I feel like, you know, I have this art studio now where I feel like I want to keep pushing the digital and keep pushing the handmade in, you know, at the same time in a way, so that they inform one another. I think moving into spaces could be something like, I've made objects and products, but it might be interesting to see what, how does the textile you know, inhabit a space more, kind of like some of the projects you showed because I haven't kind of done that before. Yeah.
Yeah.
We have a question from somebody. If they were wondering if working at Nike had more constraints. Was that hard at first, or what was that experience like, and why did you leave?
Oh my God. Whew. That was the hardest decision of my life, leaving Nike. That is not an easy one to let go, but so working there was really interesting because I worked making the shoes that were price point shoes, actually. So that meant, whatever you find at the factory store, or, it wasn't like the big famous ones. I did some of that towards the end, but so there was a ton of limitation as far as price point went, and also as far as like, what the consumer was going to buy. So like, they weren't going to buy like super flashy things necessarily, and so I was kind of forced in a good way to consider price and like function, but it was super constraining, but it was interesting because the company was super like into innovation. That's at its core. So you kind of had both polarities going on, where you felt like fed by the company in terms of the innovation that was going on around me. But as far as the product that I was specifically working on, it was super restricted. And that became a frustration for me. And, I just kind of wanted to keep learning. And so that was kind of why I left. But I still, interestingly enough, I have a job with a textile vendor. So basically I work for a company in Korea now that makes the textiles for Nike. So I'm just on the opposite side now.
Yeah, I like those knit shoes. Those are really, I always thought those were some of their most successful, was that knit feeling shoes. So
yeah, me too. I love those.
yeah. You get free tennis shoes? Here you go.
If you're size 7.
Only if you're
size.
There's a problem.
Yeah.
All right. Does anybody have any other questions, or are we about due for a break? Jan, you need to tell me.
Yeah, we can, this is Corrine. We can take a break. I have a little question. This is so interesting. I love functional art. It's like my favorite. And just being from the Midwest, I had all these great aunts who crocheted so much, and to the point where my mom ended up framing a lot of them just to preserve them. And I was wondering if that was around your family as well, or if you dig for inspiration from, the Midwest and some, because you see that a little bit. Mine is so Scandinavian in my family, but the colors are just so beautiful. I really enjoy your work. And just for everybody, I put Sarah's website in the chat too, just so you can keep following her.
Thanks. Yeah. I think, my mom was a sewer, and I grew up, I had this babysitter, actually. She was a textile artist at KU, the university there. And so she set up this little table loom for me when I was like 8. And it was cool because I remember making like something for the tooth fairy. I made this little pouch for the tooth and like $1. So I had a little exposure to the weaving. I think for me, the colors, it's kind of like when I was a kid, honestly, I kind of remember like bubblegum wrappers and like candy wrappers. For me, just pop culture, I think, was where some of my color, I was drawn to all that stuff, just like really bright colors. But I don't know, I didn't have, my house or my family didn't have really bright things. It might have been a reaction to that, like not having that.
Well, I think you have in your DNA, you have to have the ability to understand color relationship, because otherwise it's impossible to, think it. And I like that you said you loom your textiles, which is quite interesting, almost like a painter paints layers of paint and sort of reveals and adds more and takes some away.
Mm-hmm.
But you also have, what happens is that, I don't know how you did this, but your colors are very vibrant and intense and clear, but they're also soothing at the same time. You know, most people, you look at these vibrant colors and they either become irritating or
Pudding, yeah.
yeah, they over-energize the eyes, and
Mm-hmm.
they're hard to be with for a long time. They can become something that you observe, but you have a way of putting these bright colors together and pulls you in, and at the end of the day, it's very soothing. And it might be because, you know, the nostalgic plaid kind of idea with the technology together works. I don't know, but
Mm-hmm.
is it a conscious thing or is it subconscious or what?
I think it's subconscious, although I play a game with color as I'm weaving, where it'll be like this color plus this color remind me of something that's familiar. So the next color I add would be something that pulls them out of that familiarity. And so it's kind of just it's just like a puzzle, I guess, in a way. And I guess I think of it that way. And also I think I like the sense of like getting a sense of wonderment from something. I think sometimes the pattern does that. Maybe the color does it too, where it stops you, you're kind of mesmerized, like contemplating it for a little while, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
And maybe that's where the meditative kind of quality comes in, or soothing.
So do you see yourself doing more with, you're creating these pieces of art, do you see yourself going more in that direction where you do the overlay and actually creating an art piece on the woven?
Yeah, I think I am going to try that out a little bit more. Part of what dictates what I do is like availability to looms, and that's the one thing about weaving that is like really difficult, is it's not accessible to everyone. Mills aren't accessible to everyone, so it kind of depends on what tools are available. Like if I had the chance to hop back on the digital loom, I would, but I am actually will go to Iceland in next November to work on their digital loom. So I know I'll do that again, but that's the kind of like, it's not available for another year, basically. But yeah, I'm just interested in, and in the meantime, I'm just saying like, let me explore other things that can, you know, push my work in another way. So.
Yeah, because that was one of the things we discovered in working with a mill, is the number of mills that we've lost in the US.
Yeah, totally.
Mm-hmm.
A lot. I think around the time I went to 2008 actually was like, we lost a bunch on the East Coast. And so now there's like a handful, which is kind of cool because I have talked to the people at those mills, and I do know, you know, like friends of friends. And so it's like, I do have that where I could make work there. And there's another mill there's 2 mills in Europe as well that would make like kind of artist work, not where you wouldn't have to make a huge run, you know. But so it's kind of, I don't know, I kind of am open to going back into it, industrial weaving, and then back into hand, you know, like doing a little back and forth. I'm definitely not married to either one. It's kind of what comes up for me, I guess, what projects come up.
Mm-hmm. Did you see yourself collaborating with others,
Yeah.
artists or industrial designers or painters maybe? Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think when I did the collaboration with the weaving mill was really my first collaboration. It was super surprising because I had never collaborated before, and it ended up being this really great experience where we all felt super good about it, and we all contributed something that, you know, otherwise it wouldn't have been there. So I'm definitely open to that. I think it's just finding the right partner and Yeah.
Great. Thank you. And any other questions?
This is Jan, and I just want to share an observation. Yesterday we were talking about traveling extensively, meeting people outside, and today, like just listening to Sarah, it seems like she's taken an inner journey, and you know how fruitful that is, and that's translating into her work. That's very interesting take on travel, I think. We are just at the brink of our 10-minute break. So let's break now, and we will meet back here at 5:40 for the next speaker.
Okay.
Thank you, Sarah. That was really
Thank
cool.
you.
I just can't get my head off the colors. We've talked to death about it, but I just can't get enough of it. I want to go check what you said.
That's good feedback. Thank you. For all the color lovers out there. Yes.
Yeah. That's great.
We're one of them.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll take it.
Yeah, I'm just surprised because I don't see that kind of use of color in this part of the world. You know, I mean, you kind of expect this in sort of the tropical countries and sort of the more countries with a lot more history, if I may say so. You know, like and folk influence. So it's quite spectacular that you are working with these colors and so successfully at that. Just the hot pink, the fuchsia, in your weaves. I think they speak a different sort of language in this context, which is very fascinating.
Yeah. Thank you.
No, it's really wonderful.
Yeah, and what's really interesting for me is that when you look at each piece, they don't look like they're part of a larger entity. You know, like a lot of times you would have these blankets and it's, you could buy 30 yards of it. And your pieces have a beginning and an end and a middle to them. So it's all about storytelling. So they feel complete in themselves. And that's very unique to your work and your process. So I find that really interesting. Very different for the textile industry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd be interested to see where you go from here.
Yeah,
So
thank you.
And then, okay, so we'll.
Yes, we'll meet again at 5:40.
Okay.
10-minute bio break, or if you want to get a glass of something, refreshment.
Okay, thanks.
All right, 5:41. I hope everybody's back.
We
And
are.
ready for the second half of this event. And there's Stanley and Nancy to introduce Skinner.
Okay.
Okay. Oh, there we are.
There we are. Welcome back, everybody. I'm happy to introduce Skinner Myers. He is, I thought it was great. We were asking them to tell us some things about themselves. So I got this from him and I thought it was great. I mean, you were the oldest of 6 children. Your father was a preacher and your mom was an artist. And then I love what you said, that at the age of 6, you decided you needed to stop playing with toys so that you could get your life together. I thought, well, who thinks of that at age of 6? That was great. And then you went on to performing in plays in high school. And then the other interesting thing that you were saying was that you had been to 15 schools in 6 states.
Yep.
And that you moved to New York in, it was 88 to
98.
No, 98,
Yeah.
to pursue
Yeah,
entertainment.
you were young at
You were
88.
really young there.
Right.
You knew at 6 that that's
Yeah.
where you were supposed to go.
Exactly. Go straight to
You
New
knew
York.
he
Rather
had
than
home
your-
you wanted to.
And then you ended up in the food and beverage, but you
Yeah.
still had the support of friends who helped you pursue your acting, and then came back to LA after 9/11, 2001, and to LA, and it's when your journey started. And you have had, you are a professor at LMU.
Yeah.
You've had many award-winning films and had your films at film festivals worldwide, even Cannes Film Festival, and that you have received the grand jury, was it Holly Short award?
Yeah, we're gonna watch that film today.
Yeah, okay, cool.
Yeah.
So we look forward to hearing more about your journey
Awesome.
and about you and your focus.
Thank you very much, Nancy and Stanley. And I want to thank Karine, Kina, and Jan for this chance to speak. Let me share my screen. Okay, so before I get started, I just want to give everyone just kind of like an overview of what I'm going to discuss today. And then I'll start the presentation. So I want to give you a little bit more background information of where I came from and who I am, because it really plays an important role in the type of artist, filmmaker that I am now. Then I want to give a little small, brief overview of what the history of cinema is and was. And then we'll go into what I like to call directing the eye, and how I use that to direct the eye and to kind of create a frame, take the canvas of my film and fill it with mise-en-scène, with my actors, with blocking, to direct the audience into what I want them to see. So let's get started. So film aesthetics. These are some of my favorite films. Growing up, I think my first film was Jaws on a laser disc in '84, '85 maybe, and it scared the crap out of me. But I had a young father and a young mother, and so they didn't really realize that certain things probably weren't best for me to watch at that young of an age. But as I got older, I gravitated towards a lot of art house filmmakers and a lot of slow cinema filmmakers. So filmmakers like Belatar, Andrei Tarkovsky, Ingmar Bergman, and then some of the LA Rebellion filmmakers like Charles Burnett, Julie Dash, and Haley Garima. So I was born in 1980 in Kalamazoo, Michigan, the oldest of 6 kids. And like Nancy was saying, my dad was a preacher. He was a pastor of a church up until I was about 5. And then he decided to leave the church and just to start to travel and preach. And my mother was an artist, and she also had like an in-home daycare. So once my dad left the church, we really lost the income that the church was providing. And so we ended up essentially on food stamps. And so my childhood, although it was happy, you know, there's times where we slept in different hotels. I remember thinking, oh, this is fun, you know, to sleep in a hotel for 2 months, not realizing that that was not the norm. There was times where we slept in the car, and then there was times where we slept on my mother's couch, my grandmother's couch. And so these are some photos of mine with my siblings. I lived in Mexico at one point. I've lived all up and down the East Coast, and we were a pretty tight-knit family, but didn't have a lot. And that's why I think I started to dip into my imagination a lot, because around 6, I just felt like there was more to life than just toys. Now, my brother, Kevin, who's a year and a half younger than me, he played with toys until he was like 14. He'd probably kill me if he knew I was saying that. But for me, I was just it was weird. I was very interested in what life was about, right? I was very interested in death in a weird way, and what happens when you die, and why are we born, and why is there pain and suffering? I remember my first funeral at 6 years old was one of my great grandmothers who passed away. So that led me on a journey to become very insular, right? Very in my head. And I had friends and I played lots of sports, but I was always in the corner writing poetry. Now, when I was 18, I moved to New York City, and I wanted to be an actor, a model, a filmmaker. I wanted to do it all, but I didn't know where to start. And so I started in the theater, and you know, I couldn't find a job right away, so I ended up sleeping on the street for a little bit. I finally got a job at Jekyll and Hyde Club, for those who are from New York. One year I met Michael Jackson. It was a whole crazy experience, and I got into the food and beverage. Now, while I was a waiter and bartender, I started a band called Mina Loy. And these are some photos from, I believe it was Knitting Factory, one of the great venues in New York that I think this particular building, they tore down. But me and my bandmates, we played, we made a couple of records. And at the same time, I was doing theater. Did some off-Broadway theater, did some off-Broadway theater, and I actually booked a movie with Danny Trejo. This was in 2005. So at this point in my life, I thought, I've made it. I have a record coming out, a music video, and I'm doing this amazing movie, which I thought was amazing at the time, which turned out to be a horrible zombie Western movie where all the scary parts took place during the day. Needless to say that no one saw the movie, and I'm thankful for that. So I played music. I was trying to act. I was trying to figure out how to use cameras, how to write, but I was stuck in this rut of not knowing enough people and wanting to do things that were a little bigger. I needed more resources at the time than what I had. And so I ended up moving to LA after 9/11, where I met my wife. And then in 2004, we went back to New York because she went to Parsons for her MFA. And I ended up going to Columbia University, where I was studying film, but I realized, you know, I've done film a lot. Let me not spend this money to go to Columbia and just study what I know. And so I switched over to Japanese, East Asian studies, and I studied the language. So I was on this weird path of playing music, studying Japanese, trying to still be an artist, but still trying to figure out what to do with my life once I got out of school. At Columbia, once I graduated, I got a job teaching Japanese in high school that only lasted for a year. And in 2008, the market crashed. My wife and I bought our first little condo that year in Brooklyn, and I decided to go to Brooklyn College for a master's in international affairs. Now, this whole time, I wanted to be an artist, but I also wanted to try to find some stability. And I had never had stability, so pursuing it felt a little off to me. And by the time I was finishing the master's program, I went to Africa. I went to the Apple store on 14th Street. I used a credit card, and I bought 4 round-trip tickets to Kampala, Uganda. 1 for myself and 3 for friends of mine. And so we went to Africa. We spent 45 days there against the wishes of the U.S. Embassy, because it was an election month, and it was really bad. It was it was stupid looking back at going during that time. There was twice where I thought I was going to die because of the uprising that was going on at the time. But we made this documentary, and so I get back to New York. I'm bartending at the Pierre Hotel on the Upper East Side, and I'm like, what do I do with my life now? You know, I'm at this point, I'm 30, and I have this documentary, and I I know it's not going to just blow open the doors for me. So I decided to apply to film school, and I get into USC. So I come back out to LA, and I go to USC to study film in their MFA program. And after about a year, I didn't really like it. So I dropped out, and I decided to just, my goal was to make a film per year. I said, if I can just do that, find a way to pay my bills, I know things will work out. At least that's what I told myself. And so now I want to show you all, I put a little reel together of some of the trailers of the films that I've made. And then we're going to get into not only my processes of making film, but the history of cinema. Let me go here.
The white girl begged her daddy not to shoot his body full of holes. She was guilty of a lie, and he was guilty of being a nigger. I never doubted his innocence since we grew up together. I'll never forget that day. Sweat poured down my back from the heat while the mosquitoes feasted on my skin. They'd taken him from the sheriff to deliver their own brand of justice. His name was Frank Embry.
Я писал вам в послании не сообщаться с блудниками. Впрочем, не вообще с блудниками мира сего, или лихаимцами, идолослужителями, ибо тогда надлежало бы вам уйти из мира сего. Но я писал вам не сообщаться с тем, кто, называясь братом вашим, остается блудником, лихаимцем, идолослужителем. Именно с тем и есть не нужно. Первое послание Коринфян, глава 5, стих 9, он объясняет, почему мы с вами сегодня. Это наша святая обязанность избавиться от этой сатанинской музыки, бросить ее сюда, в середину костра. Ибо она от мира сего. Именно она склоняет подростков к блуду. Но наступил момент очищения, избавления от грехов. Аллилуйя! Аллилуйя! Слава тебе, Господи! По моей команде мы бросим эту сатанинскую музыку в середину костра, отторгнем ее от себя. Отторгнем! Господи Всевышний, мы благодарим Тебя за благость Твою за милосердие Твое, которыми Ты одариваешь нашу жизнь. Аллилуйя! Господи, слава Тебе!
Okay, so what is cinema? So the word cinema derives from the Greek kinematographos, which is kinema and grapho. Kinema is cinema, and that means movement. All right, and the verb grapho means to write, to record. So cinema is essentially recording moving images. And in English, the whole Greek word has been kept in the word cinematography, which is film movement. So if you wanted to be a cinephile, you would take cinema and combine it with philos, which is the love of cinema. Philos in Greek is friend as well. So the one who loves something, since the ancient Greek verb philo means I love. So just a quick brief history of cinema. These are the 7 ages of film: pioneering age, which I'm going to talk about briefly, the silent age, which was the beginnings of Hollywood, the transition age, which the birth of the talkie, the Hollywood studio age, where they would contract writers and directors and actors and actresses over, say, 10 movies over the course of 5 years. The studios ran everything. Then we have the internationalist age, where a lot of the French New Wave started, and more international film was being consumed by Americans. And then we have the New Wave age, the birth of social and political films. And now we're in the mass media age, in terms of social media and just the consumption of film or movies on devices, phones, iPods, and tablets. So in the beginning, in the early 1700s, basically what you had were magic lantern shows. And these were, what they would do is they would paint images on glasses, pieces of glass, and then project light through that, so that you would have these images, and then there would be actors who would either voice out what was being, perceived to be happening in the image. And these were like the beginnings of the early films. Once you had motion picture that was developed as photographs, a lot of filmmakers would take these photos at a frame at a time, and then they would kind of play it together to create the early film. So Edward Muybridge did this with a horse. He had a row of 12 cameras, which, believe it or not, it's the same technology that they use in The Matrix to get some of those special effects shots. They would line up like 96 cameras in a row, and they would all fire just right after another. But that technology had been around since 1878. And I want to show just a quick 15-second clip of what that first movie looked like. Oops. So cinema is essentially just moving pictures, right? So Thomas Edison developed the kinetoscope in 1891. And so you had like this peep show box where the film strips would be kind of arranged where you would crank something and look through an eyepiece and you could see the different frames, kind of like what I just showed you, happening in one smooth motion. And so the Lumiere brothers were some of the early filmmakers. And it's funny, I have a clip of the train entering the Gare de Ciutat. I'm probably butchered that name. But that movie, which is about 40 seconds long, caused people to faint in the movie theater. They thought the train was coming in to come through the theater screen. And they also made another movie called Workers Leaving the Lumiere Factory. Now, these films were just, 30 to 40 seconds of just things happening in front of the camera. But we're gonna watch this here. And this is a 4K up-res version, but people were afraid when this train came in. Okay, so now I just want to spend a little bit of time talking about part of my process of how I approach directing and filmmaking. So I like to call it directing the eye. And I like to look at paintings and talk about paintings because to me, every time I have a setup in my films that I make, that's a blank canvas for myself, okay? And I have to fill that not only with props, like I said earlier, actors and blocking and camera movements, but I also have to direct where I want the audience to, I want their eyes to go. Like I tell my students, it's not just setting up the camera and making sure that the dialogue sounds good and that the actors are doing their part, but I treat the camera as a paintbrush, and it can very well elevate the material beyond what is being happening in front of it if I learn how to direct the eye properly. So this painting I like, which is a Rembrandt painting, is because if you look at it, for me, my eye immediately goes to the center because that's the brightest spot, right? And the tension that it creates in me is that, well, I can see the back of it and it's dark and I can see the figure kind of in the shadows lurching in the back left, but I'm yearned to see what was in front of that canvas. Like I want to know what's there, right? So it forces me to lean forward a bit. And filmmakers can do that if they set their framing up properly and they direct the eye. And I like to call this composition. So composition is very important. I teach the students that if you want to become a really good director, you get a film camera and you just pop off a roll every 2-3 days of just whatever you find and work on framing. So if we look at these paintings here, it's like, where do your eyes go? And for me, with Da Vinci's The Last Supper, I immediately look to the center where Jesus Christ is sitting. There's a few reasons. One, he's framed in this window, right, in the middle. And if you look at the contrast, it goes from dark to light across the room. And on top of that, the disciples are literally looking in his direction. And so as a filmmaker, I'm like, okay, I can use some of these elements in this painting when I'm working on certain scenes that may have, it doesn't have to have a dinner or a table scene, but it could just be, 3 actors coming into a house for the first time, meeting a real estate agent. And I can use some of these techniques to really make what may be banal on paper very dynamic. And then at the Edward Hopper film, painting down below, the same thing. There's a lot of negative space on the left-hand side. My eyes go to the woman in the red dress. There's more light on that side. And so I can not only use my camera and the framing, but I can also use my lighting to direct the eye. And honestly, you're using all of these elements. So I like to think, okay, light, shadow, leading lines, color, object placement, object size, perspective, visual planes. These are all the things I think about when I'm trying to work out my shot list. For me, the process starts with, okay, I write the script. So that's one element of it. Then I have to visualize what I've written. And then I have to visualize it in a way that incorporates not only light, but bodies of actors, and then props and camera movement. And so it's a lot to think about, and it's a lot to try to process. You have to be very purposeful and detailed when you're making film, when you're doing any type of art. But a lot of times for people who are not privy to the behind the scenes work, like, oh, that was a great film, or that looked fun. And it is fun, but it's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears that go into the process and a lot of planning. So if you look at this painting of, for example, Pablo Picasso, to me, there's a lot of pain in this. The colors are very drab and dreary, and the way that he is just holding the guitar, and the way his legs are crossed, you even look at the toes at the bottom, they're kind of bony. These are all things that I look at when I'm trying to figure out the best ways to tell my stories. Okay, so for this one, I love this painting because of a few reasons. So when I first moved to when I first visited New York, it was 1997. And I remember walking past the David Letterman, the Tonight Show, the Marquee, or the Late Show. And it was like the buildings were super tall, and it was like hot. There was lots of people walking, cars were honking. There was like a hot dog vendor, just so much energy that I just couldn't take it. And I was like, I have to live here. It made me feel alive. And as a filmmaker, when I'm looking at paintings for inspiration, this painting, this Pablo Picasso painting, gives me the same type of energy, because there's so much happening in this between the different types of shades of black, gray, we have some teal, the different shapes that he's using, the contrast, the animals, the humans, the pain that I get from it, the tension, using color separation, light and shadow, and placing them specifically in certain areas to create tension and to direct my eye. I mean, it's sometimes as a filmmaker, you want the audience to, it's like walking into a dark room, right? It takes a while for your eyes to get used to the darkness. So sometimes I want to present an image that's overwhelming at first, because it's going to put them into the emotional state that I want them to be in. And then as they get used to what's happening, then I slow down the chaos, controlled chaos, and I change where the tension is coming from, so that whether they realize it or not, they are being forced to look where I want them to look. This is why I love contrast. I love these paintings by Rene Magritte. So the one on the left, it's literally like the bottom half is at night and the top half is during the day. And I have a good buddy of mine, his name's Steve Yedlin. He's a cinematographer, and he shot The Last Jedi and Carrie and a whole bunch of movies, Knives Out. And we were talking a lot about cinematography technique, and he did something like this in Knives Out by basically shooting 4 to 5 plates of the house at different times of the day. And then in post-production, they layered it. And that way he was able to control the light. So you could actually see the house. It was dark, you could see it, and you can control how bright the sky at night got, which I thought was very interesting, and is very, to me, very similar to how a painter could use different layers of paint to create these contrasts. Same with the apple. Another great cinematographer, Emmanuel Lubezki, Chivo, who I've had the pleasure to work with, uses a lot of natural light in Terrence Malick's films, Andre Inarritu's films, where they'll use natural light source from a window when they're framing their actors. So you get this nice, beautiful light here, and then dark shadows here, and it really brings out the emotion that's coming out from behind the eyes. Another thing that I like to think about is visual weight. And a lot of great paintings have visual weight. It's like, where on the canvas am I concentrating the action? Or am I using a long lens that only gets a certain amount of coverage? Am I positioning that in the corner? Where am I positioning the camera? Is it above? Is it a close-up of the eye? Is it wide? Is the furniture shifted to one side of the room? Is there a reason for that? So these are all the things that I think about in addition to light and shadow and leading lines. It's like visual weight. Like, how do I construct my film frame visually in a way where the weight is either balanced or imbalance on purpose? And so then I like this from John Basquiat, Worthy Constituent, because at first glance it's a little messy, but if you look to the right, he's using the rule of thirds to really position the key players in these grid, in these boxes. And so he's controlling where to position so that you're looking at what he wants you to look at. You may start at the top, and then you go down and you look to the right, and it's weighted. If you look at the visual weight of this image, it's weighted heavily to the left of it. And that's done on purpose because that's a battle. Basically, that was a battle between, or a duel, I should say, between Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie. And I have not seen this painting in person up front, and I'm sure the large version would be even more spectacular to look at. But I like this because of the symmetry of what he did with it. And a filmmaker who does stuff like this a lot is Wes Anderson. His stuff is very symmetrical. A lot of the action takes place dead center of the frame. The mise en scène is positioned in a way where it's perfectly leveled on all the lines. And so that's another way that a director could direct the eye. Okay, so the reason I brought all that up is because this is Frank Embry. We're gonna watch this short film that I made. It's the shortest one that I had. That's why I wanted to share it, 7 minutes. And this was the one that won the Grand Jury Prize at Hollywood Shorts, which basically opened up a lot of doors for my filmmaking career. And we're actually in development of making this into a feature film, which we're gonna shoot after COVID in 2022. So when I first discovered Frank, it was as an undergrad at Columbia University. I was on a field trip and went to this library, and our teacher was showing us these books of lynchings that had happened in America. And this, his photos jumped out at me immediately because most of the lynching photographs one finds are after the act, right? The dead body hanging in the tree or being burnt. And I had never seen a photo of one who was going to be lynched alive. And the way he stared at the camera, I felt like he was speaking to me. And I just stared at it for like 20 or 30 minutes. And I remember just like being mesmerized by it. And as I flipped through the book, it had the photo of him turning to his back to the camera after they'd basically tortured him for hours. And then it was a typical picture of the lynching after the fact. Now, what they did with these photos were these were postcards that were made, and they shipped them all across the United States to whoever, friends and relatives were. And I believe there was an exhibit in New York in, I want to say, late 90s that had collected a lot of these lynching postcards. And I believe the last one sold for like $30,000. So these were gifts. These photos were gifts to people who could not make the lynching. And so my whole process of what I just went through, I had to look at this photo and I said, okay, I want to honor this man and tell his story in an interesting way on film, but I don't want it to be, typical. I'm not a Hollywood guy, so I don't make Hollywood type movies. I'm very art house. And I had to take this image on the left of Frank looking at me and figure out, okay, how do I tell his story in a way that's impactful and that will, if people close their eyes, they'll hear it. And if they plug their ears, they'll be forced to see it. Like, how do I direct their eye? And how do I direct their ears to really hear the story of Frank? And that was hard. It took me, it started off as a journal entry, really, in college. And then I sat on it for 10 years. And then I figured out how to script it. The script was like a page and a half. It was only like 2 pages. And so just a quick, brief overview. I'm not going to read this. I'm just going to give you a quick overview of Frank and what happened to him. He was 19 years old, and he was visiting his uncle, John Collins, in Fayette, Missouri in 1899. And he was on his uncle's horse riding through town, and his family lived about 60 miles in Garnett, Kansas. But him and his brothers were visiting their uncle for a little bit, doing some work on his uncle's farm. And Willie Daughtery, her father, William, said that Frank raped his daughter, and a mob chased after him. And basically, he got arrested, and then the sheriff was going to transport him to a different city for a trial. And the mob just kind of grabbed him from the sheriff, dragged him to the spot, and that they said he raped this girl, and then they tortured him, and then they lynched him. They tortured him until he confessed after claiming his innocence, and then they lynched him. And so that was basically the story. And it's in all these newspaper accounts that I discovered too in my process of doing research. And so what I did was I just took the information that was in the newspaper accounts, which were probably, not completely accurate, but did my best to take some of that information, take the visual palette that I had kind of put together, and use those two things to tell his story. So this was the, I'm not gonna read this either, but this was the journal entry that I wrote. Basically, I was saying like, he seemed tired, and it just made me think about his brothers and sisters and what his life could have been. And it made me think about my life, and just, it took me down that rabbit hole of you know, I don't know, I guess like the purpose of life, and why do we treat each other the way we do? That whole thing that I was thinking about from the age of 6, like I went down that rabbit hole. And I basically had to write this for him just to kind of get it off my chest. And so, you know, it was, I wasn't sure if it was going to work. I wasn't sure if the film was going to work. I was very nervous about making it. I decided to play him myself because I just didn't want to try to find an actor to play him. And some of my good buddies from film school chipped in and really helped me put it together. And so I want to show that to you all, because I know I'm running a little past time. I want to show that to you all, and then I'll take questions. Let's see here. So here's the film.
The white girl begged her daddy not to shoot his body full of holes. She was guilty of a lie, and he was guilty of being a nigger. I never doubted his innocence since we grew up together. I'll never forget that day. Sweat poured down my back from the heat while the mosquitoes feasted on my skin. They'd taken him from the sheriff to deliver their own brand of justice. His name was Frank Embry. I hid behind a tree and stuck my head out for a better look. We only locked eyes for only a few seconds, but it seemed like hours. He was worn out and tired, fallen down twice from exhaustion. But he suddenly had strength. A warm glow surrounded him. I could see his pain, what it must have been like to be standing there, barefoot and naked at that very moment. His name was Frank Embry. I didn't know whether to scream or weep. He and I had been born into the wrong skin, ridiculed, beaten, spat upon, cursed at, abused. But he was going to be crucified today. But none of this broke his spirit. He prepared for his final moments on this earth. His body upright, strong, steadfast. He knew that this life was temporary. The lynch mob's eyes spoke with ignorance, hatred, and confusion. At first glance, I hated all of them. But later, I'd only feel sorry for him. His name was Frank Embry. He'd been falsely accused of raping Millie Dotery, a 15-year-old white girl. He kept saying over and over that he was innocent. But they didn't want to hear that. After hours of torment, he caved and screamed for mercy. He told them that if they'd stop torturing him, wouldn't burn him, but instead either shoot him or hang him, he would confess. There wasn't any evidence. There wasn't a trial. There wasn't justice. I will never forget his name. His name was Frank Embry.
I ask that someone write my parents and tell them to live in a way where they'll go to heaven. Please send my revolver to my father and the dime I had in my pocket to my mother.
You better pray to your God, you fucking nigger.
Dear God in heaven, please forgive me all my sins. I hope you'll let me into heaven. Oh Lord, bless me in this way. I pray that my parents and all of mankind will forgive me. Amen.
Okay, so that is it. Hopefully right on time.
All right, I think you've had 6 minutes.
Yeah, cool. Awesome.
Wow, that's pretty powerful. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for giving me a chance to share.
Yeah. And I love the all the influences you talked about with art and the different artists and what you look at, and so I thought that was, you know, that was really an interesting perspective.
Yeah.
Do that.
Yeah, I try to always felt like the more diverse experience one has in life, and the more things that you do that doesn't always have to deal with what your art is, really informs what your art can be. And you know, getting close to losing your life a couple of times within a 2-week period changes your perspective a lot, you know. And it was weird because I realized that there was so much more that I really wanted to explore, and other art practices. This is why I've always wanted to play music and write and do other different things. Because it was just, it's like, how much can I gobble up while I'm alive, you know? And even if I live to be 100, it's probably not enough time to really soak in all the riches and beauties that we could find, not only in this planet, but from each other too, you know? So I just kind of have like this internal ticking clock, and I just want to consume as much stuff and then pump out. Because there, you know, there's a lot of times in my life where I'm like, oh, I got to remember this moment. This is special. I got to remember it. And then like, I can't remember it 10 years later. And that drives me nuts. And so with film, I can at least, you know, make these memories 24 frames per second on film, on celluloid, and hopefully they'll live forever, you know? Hopefully they'll live. I mean, film is very young, really. I mean, it's, you know, we've been making movies since, what, 1915, really? So there's a lot more to discover in it, you know? But I just feel like time is of the essence, since I need to just soak it all in as much as I can. And film is one way that I do that, right? And writing is another way that I do that, just expressing what is weighing on my heart and mind, really.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting that that last image of him hanging on from the tree was a reminder almost of Kara Walker's the cutouts that she does.
Yep. Yeah.
Real feeling of an art piece, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny because one of the first things that I thought about when I wanted to tell Frank's story, I was just like, okay, in my head it was like tree in the middle of nowhere and his body hanging there, and we're just like, that was like an image, like a picture, like a painting. And so I scouted all over California, all over LA County to find that tree, and that was in Simi Valley, and we were shooting the same day that the first season of Westworld was shooting. And so they basically were like, you have 8 hours to shoot on that tree, and that's it. And don't hang anything in the tree because it's a dead oak tree. And I was like, okay, yeah, we won't hang anything. And then the guy had to leave to go take his son to soccer practice. I was like, yo, get that dummy in the tree right now. So like my brother helped me and we strung it up. But it was hard to find a tree. I went everywhere. I was driving sometimes 4 or 5 hours out to try to find this tree in the middle of nowhere. And so the feature, I think we're going to shoot in Oklahoma, but we shot that up in Simi Valley. Yeah.
So I think I love the last video with the tree, you know, with the tree in silhouette. Because, you know, oak trees have this torturedness about them, and it begins. So instead of focusing on the people observing, you know, the trees become the observer.
Mm-hmm.
They're the witness to the crime and the event, and carry on that as a witness.
Yeah.
Forever. Yeah.
So for me, trees represent two things, right? Not only are the witness of heinous crimes that have happened, like the last thing that a lot of people saw in their life was, you know, either top of the tree or the bottom of the tree, but they're also, tree represents life and giving life too, right? And so it's this, it's like the extreme juxtaposition of those two things, and to reconcile that, the cognitive dissonance that one has to be okay with, like that area in the middle is like, to me, where it's very torturous, right, mentally. And it represents a lot of not only how I feel, but I think how a lot of people feel in a lot of ways about all kinds of different things, right? So something that can represent beauty and life. You know, trees have been, I mean, you go to Redwood, it's like they've been here for thousands of years, can also represent death and torture. And especially when oak trees, like that oak tree was, as you saw, the limbs were breaking and cracking, it was dried. I mean, it was in bad shape because of drought and because of fires. And so, yeah, trees are, I love trees. I'm an advocate for trees. I love trees, but yeah.
The power of what you're doing. So, you know, trees play a real part in my own work. but I see them as, you know, I think the trees, the roots connect to each other and they communicate to each other in their own language.
Yep.
And there's a great exhibition about trees in Milan called Broken Nature by Paolo Antonelli for the Museum of Modern Art. And it was just brilliant. And it talked about the secret life of trees and nature. And, you know, we're so human-centric that when we look at a picture of a forest or a jungle and there's a tiger in the jungle, we don't see the jungle, we see the tiger, even if it's little, because it has eyes. And you kind of took that, you know, I observed this tree as this witness, this godlike witness. So I have to look at trees differently. So the power of your art is that you do that. And so your shorts are so meditative. There's something about them that, you know, the cadence of the cinematography and the music draws people in. Could you talk a little bit about the do this?
Yeah, for sure.
Why?
So some of my favorite filmmakers are philosophers and thinkers. And Andrei Tarkovsky, who was a brilliant Russian filmmaker who passed away in 1988, made some of the most profound films, in my opinion, and inspired filmmakers like Alejandro Inarritu and so many others. And Bela Tar is another one. He's a Hungarian filmmaker who retired in 2013 because he was like, I have nothing else to say after making 7 features, which I thought was amazing. But for me, I love we live in such a society where everything has to happen fast, right? And I like to slow things down because to me, the landscape is a character as well. And it's not just about humans or the actors in the movie. I like when actors exit a landscape and we can just stay on that, because that says something as well. I mean, the earth has been here way longer than we have. And so there's so much richness in just staring at a landscape that's been there and will be there way after we're gone. And so I try to bring in some of those slow cinema elements to the work, and also try to think of, I'm in the beginning stages of a PhD, and I'm trying to theorize and put into practice creating a ontological cinematic language for Black cinema that is not rooted in anything Western, looking more towards third world cinema, actually, for inspiration, but trying to use complete different tactics and camera movements and angles and shots to tell my story and other stories. And so I'm always trying to do something different, not just for the sake of being different, but trying to really dig deep and figure out how to communicate with what's, you know, between my brain and my heart, and then give that to the audience. Because like one of my professors told me, you know, even if you're doing experimental film or avant-garde or whatever, there has to be a clarity to your work so that the audience can understand what's going on. Because if that's not clear, then no one's ever going to be able to have any discourse with you. And so I try to because it's like, you can't reinvent the wheel, right? So I try to take stories. I could have showed we could have done Frank's story like The Roots, you know, string them up, beat them, show all that really Hollywood stuff. And it's like, that's not, you know, that's not interesting. I'm trying to get into the psyche, right? And so I'm always just, I'm trying to go to a deeper layer, not only visually, but in how I even write description, dialogue, and action, how I frame it. I mean, the feature version that we're doing, I mean, it's a 51-page script. It's going to be a 2.5-hour movie. There's, in that 2.5 hours, there's maybe 40 minutes of dialogue, and the rest of the movie is silent, you know? And so every shot in that feature is going to be presented as a moving painting, you know? Every move could be, if you froze it and made a screenshot, would be its own painting. And that's how I try to approach crafting my visual language.
Well, I think that's going to be very powerful. So I'm sure you're familiar with the collaboration between Robert Wilson and Philip Glass.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And you know, early in my life, I saw Einstein on the Beach, which is a 7-hour opera.
Yep.
And I think that, you know, it moves like 3 feet. It forces you to get into a Zen state. And, you know, I think that, and Sarah kind of does this too with her nuances of color shifting, and causes you to look at the, you know, different layers of something. And it's, so I love slow,
Yeah.
you know, I think you know, I see what's going on in the world with all this, you know, 2-second change. I mean, the modern mind through digital media picks up imagery so quickly. So I think that what you're doing is a service to kind of re-circuit the brain in a way, to think and absorb more slowly and more subtly.
Yep.
So I look forward to seeing where you go with this, and I look forward to a feature film.
Thank you.
Hope you get somebody with money that can understand that and back it.
Oh, yeah. So yeah, I do. So that's why I was really, sometimes you need people in powerful places to understand what you're trying to do. And so we got very fortunate to land a really big producer. And so that's, I'm working really hard to get it ready so that when COVID is over, we can go right into production. But yeah, we're putting a team together, and we already have some actors attached, and we're going out to more actors. So I'm really excited about it. Just, my main thing is to honor Frank, right? I honor him. And then there's other things I want to talk about and show. But I just want to say, kind of like that, the opera on the beach, Bellatar has one of the, to me, is an amazing film, Santantago, or Satan's Tango. It's 7 hours and 19 minutes. And Criterion Channel just put it on their site. It's hard to find, but it's an amazing film. And yeah, slow cinema is, I would check out like Lab Diaz, and there's so many great slow cinema filmmakers. But yeah.
So I have to ask you, the sleeping, I think it was called The Sleeping Negro.
Yeah, The Sleeping Negro.
So can you talk about the symbolism on that one?
Yeah, for sure. So that's the feature we just finished. It's going to be coming out next year. We're waiting to hear back from a couple of festivals, but that's a very surreal, I like surrealism and I like magical realism. And so that's a very surreal drama about a man who is struggling with his place in America as a Black man, but more importantly, everything that he thought he knew, he realizes he was confused on. And so what happens is that there's a couple of incidents in his life in one day that are racial, and he starts to push everyone away to hit this big reset button. But it gets very esoteric because there's a scene between him and his doppelganger. He floats. There's birds come flying out of his chest. There's a lot of crazy things that happen in there. There's a film called Holy Mountain by Jordowski, and I got inspired by that because he had a lot of surreal stuff in there. Louis Buñuel's another amazing surreal filmmaker. Salvador Dali. He and Salvador Dali did a lot of work in the 1940s and 1930s. And so it's a pretty intense film. It's about 82 minutes. I play the lead actor, the lead character, and I'm proud of it. We didn't have lots of money to make it, but it led to me getting hooked up with a producer to make Frank's movie, which is going to be a much bigger project. So, but I'll let everyone know. I think we're looking at like a spring sometime for it to be released. There's a few festivals that we're talking to. We're seeing if they're going to program it. So we'll see how it plays out.
Oh, Cece Cole, did you want to ask your question?
Hi. Yeah, sorry. I left it in the chat. I just wanted to ask about surely you know the photograph by Jeff Wall. That's yes, and I just wanted to clarify or see that I'm sure you were inspired by his photograph. You might have mentioned.
Oh no, definitely.
I love his work.
Oh yeah, no, definitely that photograph, and also too Andrei Tarkovsky. he was the at least what I know, he was the first filmmaker to, he had a movie called Ivan's Childhood, I think in 1953. And in the opening scene, this boy is like picking oranges or apples, and all of a sudden he just starts to float. And I'm like, what in the world? And so I've always wanted to do something like that. And again, with Jeff Wall's work. And so a lot of people haven't picked up on that yet. So thank you for picking up on that.
And I was also wondering, because we often talk about movies being, movies being, photographs being cinematographical or graphic, but we don't talk about that much about films being sort of like photography. And I feel that way with your work. It's not just because of the slowness, it's just the way you capture imagery. And I wondered if you've ever showed still photography or are interested in it, because there is so much kind of power that can also be caught in that, just that one moment.
Oh yeah. Oh no, for sure. I'm a photographer as well. I shoot medium format, and I've shot some large format work, and I do a lot of portraiture work. I haven't shot in probably a year, just because when I was making this film, it was like a stressful time. I sold a lot of gear. But the reason I love medium and large format photography is because for large format, it takes me, I don't know, 5-6 minutes to set up my shot, and then I have to triple check my settings. And I love that because I have to slow down. And about, I think 6 years ago, I got back into film photography because I used to shoot weddings to make money on like a digital camera. And I remember one wedding, I shot like 6,000 photos, and I was like, you know what, this is ridiculous, because the client was like, can I see all the photos? And I was like, no, there's no way I'm gonna give you 6,000 images. That's insane. And so I'm like, you know what, I'm going to film so people can't like look at the back of my camera and be like, oh yeah, that's good. And but medium and large format, like I shot a ton of my son when he was younger, and I got to photograph a lot of actor friends of mine. But yeah, I love film. I don't know, I need to start shooting again, but you know, everyone's a photographer, right, with their iPhones, which is fine, whatever. I'm not hating on people, but
I'll say.
yeah. Well, film photography slows me down, and I really put so much work into trying to bring that to the films that I make. So yeah, I'm glad you picked that up. But I love film photography. Love it.
Thank you. This is
Thank
great.
you. Thank you.
Your weavings are just absolutely stunning. Thanks for that too.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, I was going to agree with somebody who put in the chat too. I love that in the end where you have the accuser looking into the camera.
Yeah. That was like a split-second decision, because we were on set, and I definitely wanted her in there. Like, there's a painting called Christina's World. I don't know if anyone's familiar with that. And I wanted a similar feel where it was like this big field and the girl in the scene. But we were talking, and I was like, you know what? It was our last roll of film too. We only shot that. We had 3 rolls of film. I had 15 minutes worth of shooting time. It was 35 millimeter, and we had 5 setups. And so I was like, you know what? On this last roll, because that long shot took all of our film, I was like, just turn and look at the camera. And I was like, give me a neutral expression, because that way the audience will just put onto your face whatever expression they're feeling. Right. And so we decided to keep it in the edit.
Yeah, that's great. So now do we still have time for a little Q&A or?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you should pull Sarah into the conversation, and I think it's yeah, Skinner, Sarah, Stanley, and Nancy. It's, you know, you guys want to discuss something together. And anybody else, if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to chip in, sound out.
Yeah, make us all accountable here.
I actually had a question for Skinner. During one of our processes of judging this year with awards, maybe this is me giving away too much, but we ended up talking about Parasite, the film, and how the house actually became a villain. And I was wondering how, you know, that might actually end up changing design and architecture about what is a beautiful home these days. And just wondering about how you've used architecture as a character in any of your films.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's a great question. So I've always wanted to be able to build my sets. I worked on the second season of True Detective, where I worked in the art department, and we built most of the interior sets. What I had to do was go to the real location and sneak photographs, which almost got me hurt because I had to go to this like seedy bar and like pretend I was drinking beer and take these pictures, and I ran out of there. But we used that to literally build these sets, and we made them extra wide and extra big. And what we did was we took the essence from the photographs and we built them out in a way where like the largeness of it felt oppressive, you know? And it worked twofold, because on top of that, it allowed us to move cameras in places where you couldn't move them in the real location because they weren't built for cameras. And so I always try to use the space of the room to dictate, like allow the space of the room to dictate how I'm going to move the camera. So I have this, like for example, when I made this film called Nightmares by the Sea, I was shooting in my brother's studio apartment in Culver City. And I had this great idea. I was like, I'm gonna get this circular track, put it from his kitchen to the bedroom. I rented the equipment. I didn't even test it. Rented the equipment. We get there, doesn't fit. So then I had to reimagine the space in conjunction with how I wanted to tell this particular shot that I thought was really important. And I allow the architecture of his, the layout of the space to dictate the camera move, but I still was able to get what I wanted to get visually. Does that answer the question?
Sort of, but I guess it is how you're using the space to really get. I'm disappearing into my space, by the way. Sorry, but yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I don't really know what to add to that, except for I love your work, and I'm really excited to see what else you make, and I'm excited to see the feature.
Thank you, thank you.
Yeah.
With the feature, we're building all of our sets, so I'm gonna get a chance to work with some builders and really create work that represents what the shotgun houses and sugarcraft farms look like, but also create it in a way where I can, you know, do these camera movements that I really want to do, which I couldn't do if I were to use stuff that was already pre-built.
Yeah, your new challenge might be when you have a budget is how do you use that budget? Because sometimes without the budget, you end up becoming more creative in a way. Yeah.
That is very true.
Good point. Yeah.
Any other questions? Don't be shy.
I have a almost random question. You seem to be very influenced by artists and their work. Have you yourself tried painting or creating something with your hands? I mean, I know you play with photography and obviously cinema, but have you also tried working with paint in any way?
I haven't painted since I was a kid. And I do have a desire to have like this weird fantasy of becoming a furniture maker, which I don't know if that's ever going to happen. So I would love to maybe start finding time to do that, but I haven't painted. I think maybe once my kids get older, I'll find some more time to maybe do some things like that. But I should, I mean, I don't know if I'll be any good. I probably suck, but I haven't painted since I was probably, 12 or 13. Haven't thought about that.
I think what's really interesting about the two of you, that seems to be a common thread, is that well, first of all, you have so many different disciplines, that you each have explored, and that you're turning something that maybe seems so straightforward, but you're turning it on its head and looking at it in a totally, different direction, or in a different way. And I think that's the beauty of, the innovation, that your outcomes is that you're taking that leap of faith to go in a new direction, to explore different ways that that people haven't explored, and you're finding your own way and creating something, very different. And so it makes those of us who look at it or experience it, take a step back and go, wow, that's, makes, maybe, hopefully it inspires us to, do that same thing of not taking things so literally, but, taking them and saying, what can I do differently? How can I change this, manipulate it, And I think that's the beauty of what, you both shared today.
Thank you.
Is being able to do that.
Yeah, and you've also both brought kind of this handcrafted quality to both processes. One is in textiles and in art objects, and yours in filmmaking. That it's cinematic without being sort of cinematic, so to speak. It's unprocessed, under the visualizations elements are very simple, so they become like observational. So they're very almost like when you look at wine, artisanal wine, or cheese that's artisanal, that your art processes are very artisanal. So it's refreshing. And so do you find, how do you find your vehicle to expose your work? If you were to speak to other people like yourself who are out of the mainstream, to get exposure?
For me, it's mostly been social media. Instagram lends itself well to still images. So I think that's been the main piece of exposure, as well as going to actually the craft fair I went to in San Francisco was really great, because there was kind of like a huge cross section of people that went to that fair, like buyers, as well as just like the average design person that appreciates design and art. So I think actually some fairs that I've been to have been really great, just to actually talk to people in person.
For me, mainly in the beginning was film festivals. When you submit a film to a film festival, usually there's between 5,000 to 10,000 other films. So being able to win some awards at these festivals really opened up some doors for me. And then I got an agent. And so at this point, it's just between my agent and my producer and their networks, I'm able to get more exposure now. But in the beginning with film festivals, really just submitting all the films to all the festivals, spending that money, but it worked out in a way. Also too, you could just, Vimeo is great. There's a lot of friends of mine who have been discovered from, putting something on Vimeo, and then they get like thousands and thousands of plays, and then people start calling. So I would say festivals and online releases of the short films. And then for the feature films, it helps to have representation, because then you can meet just buyers and distributors,
Would you find Vimeo better for you than something like YouTube?
I think Vimeo is better because it's marketed and geared towards storytellers more so, because YouTube it's almost like Kickstarter for crowdfunding versus Seed and Spark. Seed and Spark is strictly for crowdfunding films, and Kickstarter is like you can do inventions and all kinds of products. And so I kind of see Vimeo that way compared to YouTube. And I do know there's executive friends of mine who have assistants who just spend all day on Vimeo, just looking at stuff to try to find new talent for work that they need. So not that it couldn't happen on YouTube. There's a couple of people, companies like Omleto and Dust. I did a web series. I was an actor in this web series, and they got picked up by Dust on YouTube, on the YouTube channel, and we got like 400,000 views in like 2 weeks. So that can work too, but Vimeo is really geared towards films, in my opinion.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
My name's Asta. I'm a film student at RISD, and I was just wondering, correct me if I'm wrong, but you said that you wrote the script for this film many, many, many years ago as a student at Columbia. And I'm just curious, how do you stay with the story for this long? And what's the inspiration process or journey, I guess, for you to then take it and remember that you wrote it and then put it into production all these years later?
That's a great question. So at Columbia, I wrote a piece of like journal entry, and which ended up being the basis for the script. But it moved me so much, and I remember just kind of storing it away, and I was like, I got to do something with this. But I was so caught up in my band at the time, I wasn't really making movies. And I remember coming across it, going through an old hard drive, and I was floored because I just made a short film after leaving True Detective, and I was like, what do I do next? And I found this journal entry, and I immediately wrote the script. Now the script went through maybe 5 or 6 iterations, but I was passionate because I felt the same way 10 years later when I looked at the photo than I did 10 years prior, right? But what had happened in those 10 years is that more information about who was in the photo came out. Because when I first saw it, there was no name connected to it. And then 10 years later, it was like, his name's Frank Embry. And then I'm a type of person who I will like go to the depths of the internet to try to find living descendants. And I made that movie 3 years ago. I just spoke to his brother's granddaughter's granddaughter last week on the phone. His entire family moved to LA after the lynching. He had 12 brothers and sisters. They all lived in Watts, and they all were concrete laborers. And his dad is buried in Carson. So I'm gonna go visit the gravesite. And now that I'm talking to the family, they're all behind it. So it was that desire to want to connect with this man's family and to honor him that kept me going all those years. And then, getting the resources to make the movie on film. And that was my first movie I shot on film. After that, I was like, I'll never shoot digital ever again. And I haven't.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Nothing wrong with digital. I'm just saying, for me, I do film.
That is a choice. That is a big choice.
Yep. Yeah. The feature is going to be in 35mm black and white.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because Julius Schumann, who is a famous mid-century photographer who lived to be 98, I think, but he was a digital virgin, he called himself, because he only used analog photography. Mm-hmm. And he didn't believe in digital because he really thought the process of filming from a camera, being analog, and then processing it was a way to connect to what he was looking at. Mm-hmm. So it's interesting.
Yeah. Yep.
And he was one of the people that helped to make mid-century architecture visible to the world, because his photographs, he simply documented it, and it was published and actually allowed mid-century modern to be recognized. So it's interesting. So keep up the digital world. I mean the analog world.
Thank you.
I think that we've exhausted the questions. Jan, should we move to the last portion?
So the last fun portion of this event, we have 2 raffle prizes to give away. And I'm going to let Tina and Anne announce the prize and the winners.
Fantastic. So we have 2 prizes. We have a Pablo Uma lamp sponsored by Haywood, and Tina picked a winner for that one.
Okay, guys.
Okay.
Is Susan here?
I'm here.
Susan? Oh, okay, you're the winner. Congratulations.
Oh, thank you. Awesome. I have a new puppy, so she's been.
Congratulations. And the second prize is a desk table lamp sponsored by Cerno Lighting and PLP SoCal. I had a picture of that, so I put it in the chat box. So who's the winner, Tina?
Tom Newman. Is Tom there? Tom Newman, I see you.
Tom.
Did you say Tom Newman?
Yeah.
I'm here. I'm here.
Congratulations.
With no video, sorry.
Great.
Well, congratulations.
Where can I see the picture? You said it's in the chat?
Yeah, I put it in the chat box. It's a really cool table lamp, and it has a little holder where you can charge your phone if you have an iPhone.
Okay, great. I'll check it out. Thank you.
And if you put your email in the chat box, I can also send you an email and get your address.
Okay, great. Thanks so much.
Yeah, fantastic. Congratulations.
Susan as well, if you want to just privately ping Anne your email address, then we can coordinate the...
Yes, we'll coordinate delivery.
Yes, will do. Thank you.
Excellent. Congratulations, winners. And thank you all for staying with us for 2 days till the last minute to have this excellent conversation about creativity, about people's journeys, about people's stories, experiences, outward, inward, you know, crazy, cool, moving, you know, everything under the sun. It's this great spectrum of things that we have crossed over the last couple of days. I wouldn't say about 6 hours of, you know, this has been a very riveting and also thought-provoking couple of days for me personally, and I'm very excited to be part of this, and I'm very, very glad and thankful to our speakers and our excellent moderators for agreeing to be with us and sharing their thoughts and experiences. I want to thank the committee members who have worked very hard to put this together. I also want to give a shout out to Tina and David Kennedy for introducing many of the panelists and the moderators, and to Anne and to Mary Davis for helping with the sponsorship. And as always, my biggest thanks to our sponsors, that is Stone Source, PLP, and HLV, for supporting us and standing by us when we, you know, pull these kind of events together. Without their support, we cannot do much. And I hope the larger group takes away something from this that's deep and that stays with them and inspires them through their journey, through their profession.